Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 50 of the Titanforge podcast. My name is Ratnos, joined by the usual hosts, Tettles and Trell. Hello. And this week, special guest, Growl, aka twitch.tv/yummytv. Welcome
Hello,
to the
friends.
show.
Thanks for having me.
So this week is our anniversary. We have, done the show for a year now, which is pretty impressive. I think that we hit 50 episodes in that window. What do you think, Tettles?
I think it was 49 in the window. I think I think the 50th is like the +1 on the year, but like, holy shit. I'm surprised that we were able to get it so consistent down to a week-to-week basis, because one of the episodes we missed was due to BlizzCon. And I don't remember when the other one was, but like, it's been great, and we do appreciate all of the support. It really makes it worth us spending a lot of time and making these shows great. So we do appreciate all of the support that we guys have gotten from you all.
Especially our long list of crazy Patreon names.
Oh yeah, which we'll get to soon. But first, let's introduce our special guest this week, Growl, aka twitch.tv/yummytv. So, Growl is the world's America's greatest healer. So the greatest American healer in the world on the RaiderIO.
A war hero, nonetheless.
World first US healer on on RaiderIO rankings. And to bring this home, I'm going to show you guys a page of the RaiderIO rankings. This is the tank rankings, and Growl is the healer associated with this top tank here, Tomobor, the Guardian Druid. So that's, I think, everything you need to know about him. We don't need to look at the healer rankings in particular, just the tank rankings. And just Growl is on the back of this tank here.
It's true. I'm just a guy with the bear. It's fine.
The bear's favorite companion.
Yeah. So that's actually let's go look at the stupid healers list instead. So yeah, again, US top healer, 11 points ahead of Ventor, a common antagonist over at twitch.tv/yummytv. Growl, do you have any other ways that you'd like to introduce yourself?
Man, I mean, I don't think there could be anything more prestigious than the guy who's 11 points ahead of Ventor and the guy who plays with. Like, if there's one thing, if I die tomorrow and I go down in WoW history, I'll just be the guy who was ahead of Ventor who played with the bear. That's fine with me.
True. Okay. So.
Sorry, I had to say, the day I saw your stream title as "Today We Passed Ventor" was like the funniest thing ever to me. I just started cracking up when I saw it on my phone.
I don't know if you know this, but his gear lists are named after people, like other Resto Druid players, and he has like the most safe one as like the Drogo/Ventor build, meaning that he's not going to do any damage. Then he has like the most aggressive one is like the Nania QD one, meaning he's going to do the most damn.
Yeah, there's the Gigabob build with all the haste. There's the JB build. There's a lot of builds. You know, you have to be a true viewer of Yummy TV to know all the different builds and have all that in your playbook. You know, you have to get around to all the rest of the druids. It's a fine art.
True, but you didn't actually even start as a Resto Druid, right? You were a Mistweaver when you got started in this game, which was earlier this expansion as well, right?
No, so I played this. I wanted to get into MMOs. So I played this really, really good-looking MMO. It's called Bless Online.
Okay.
I made lots of really, really good friends in that game. I'm sure if you've been around for a little bit, you know that game. So as soon as that game flopped, I'm like, well, everyone that played that game is like, well, let's play the new WoW expansion. So I had never played WoW before, and my buddy, he was a big Sea-Doo fan, he's like, man, you got to play Resto Shaman. Resto Shaman is so good. So my first character was actually a Resto Shaman, and it was tough because I was a big Sea-Doo fan, right? So first of all, no add-ons, no anything, right? I've been playing the game for a week, but I'm a BlizzCon competitor, so I can't modify my UI. I watched his first video, Sea-Doo, how to heal. Okay, well, don't click your party frames. You can never have your mouse on your party frames. You have to hotkey every single party member one by one. That's how you heal from Sea-Doo. So I'm going into dungeons. I'm trying to play heroic dungeons, and I'm trying my hardest not to click my party frames. And I just have all these hotkeys for every single party member in Mythic Plus. And I'm actually getting kicked out of heroic group finder. I got kicked out of heroic group finder at least twice in my first week playing the game because it was just so hard to heal. And eventually I started getting my feet going. I was playing like 12 keys and 13 keys. And then I wanted an alt, so I made a Brewmaster. And eventually I just started playing Mistweaver, and I'm like, man, this is way better than Shaman. Why am I playing a Shaman? And then eventually I'm like, well, all right, I want a Boomy because I played tank and I played healer. Let me try DPS now. And I played Boomy. And then eventually I started playing Resto Druid. I'm like, man, this is way easier than Mistweaver. And that was like sometime into season 2. And eventually it just sort of stuck that I'm a Resto Druid main now.
Okay, question. Do you still have like all 5 party members bound to different key findings?
No, I had to remove all those. They were for quite some time. So my progression went from binding every single player to then I would only bind myself and my tank because I just gave up eventually. It was too hard with 5 people. So I had a select tank bind and a select self bind. And eventually I couldn't do it because then I'm just clicking on everyone else. Why wouldn't I just click on my tank? So then I think I still have a self cast button that I use, but I mouse over everyone even in PvP now.
Has CDU ever gotten in touch with you about this betrayal of, his how to heal guide?
Man, I just feel like that's like sort of the message that I try to get across to not specifically to CDU, but to everyone. I feel like a lot of times people who are high up WoW people are a little bit detached to what it's like to be a noob. Like they don't really know what it's like to just be on the streets and just be figuring out your buttons and not have a friends list full of all these sick people that invite you, and it's what it's like to load up and all right, it's a push week. Well, okay, let's open up LFG. Like, let's see if I can get into this 16 key, I feel like, so I try and tailor everything that I do when I give advice to that mindset, because although I'm getting a little detached from it now, I still have it pretty fresh in my mind what it's like. So it's not CDU's fault, man. I mean, the guy owns, right? But it's just been so far before he's known like what it's like to walk in on an arena match as a shaman for the first time. It's hard for that to be good advice. Like for him, all that stuff is super important, and you need to have a wind shear enemy number 2 macro in at all times. But if you're doing dungeons or you're doing anything, right, or if you're a 1600 arena player, that's just not helpful for you.
Wind shear at mob number 6 in the pool macro, that'd be useful for Mythic Plus.
That would be sick, actually. A hibernate bloodswarmer macro. I mean, there's some possibilities. There's
definitely, yeah, it's not the craziest idea, but it's also not the least crazy idea. All right, to introduce Growl further to our audience, let's now play a little clip from a recent Growl stream about priorities. Okay, yeah, this is a good one.
The money is friendship. But even more important than friendship is overall damage. If you have to lose a friend to gain overall damage in the dungeon, well, sacrifices must be made. Clearly here, right? Ellismere understood. Red said he had no threat. Hear him? I don't have a lot of threat, but he doesn't care about his friend because he wants to acquire overall. But there's one thing more important than overall. I think we all know what it is. I don't have to tell you guys.
God damn it.
And this key was big. That clip quickly rose to be one of my top clips on my stream. I didn't mean to
no, of course,
out Ellismere,
of course, but... no flame at Ellismere. Like that is, it's an unfortunate moment, of course, in the key, and like, that we're not trying to flame him. He's a great healer. It's just a funny clip.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I do a lot on my stream. It's a little taboo on Twitch, so I know a lot of people don't do it, or who knows. I hope it'll be a thing more in the future, but I think the community aspect of Mythic Plus, like the whole idea that everyone's out in their own groups and everyone's out trying to time crazy stuff is super fun. And I just want to, like, part of my Mythic Plus experience isn't just doing keys, right? It's I have Ellismere's stream open, and I have JB's stream open, and I have Nania's stream open. And I'm like, oh man, like they're in this key, or hey, and our group actually just sits around. Like half the time we'll have a good key and we'll get in there, and then our tank will be like, holy crap, Ellis Smear's about to heal 27, told the Gore last boss. And everyone will, like, when you hear that, you know that everyone tabs out. We're not starting the key. Everyone's going to tab in and watch. And it's just it's part of the Mythic Plus experience, I think. And that's something that I want to share with everyone too. And it's super fun to just tune into someone's stream and just watch and see what happens. Like, it's not like sports where you have your one team and you're cheering for them. You don't care about anyone else. Like, I love to see everyone's success and everyone's failures, and it makes it way more fun when you do that.
It's actually so good for your like learning as a team too, because you see what 3 other teams are doing in between your keys, and if everybody's watching at the same time, that's like really, really good for the group.
Another thing that's a really good learning source, back to the like Sea-Doo thing, Growl, you've actually created your own YouTube channel full of guides and stuff. Well, 4 guides and stuff so far, but all within the past week has been added up here. So,
man, yeah, great transition. So my my YouTube channel, I just started it. I love YouTube as well. I watch a ton of YouTube. For me, Twitch and YouTube are 2 independent and awesome sources of entertainment in my life, and so I want to not just have a Twitch stream, and I want to make videos and talk about stuff more in depth, because sometimes I get questions about stuff and I have sort of well thought out, articulate answers, but I'm just in the middle of healing a pull or something's going on, or I'm in a break, and it's like having some videos with all spelled out what my thoughts are about something make it a lot easier, and then people can digest it or watch it on their own time. So yeah, I think I've enjoyed it a lot. It's cool to make a video and have people pop in and see it and give comments, or hey, you know, this is, for example, the new corruption vendor that comes out, right? Every single person that comes in the chat, and not just mine, everybody, what do I buy? What do I buy on this? You know, what's the best corruption? It's like, well, I don't know, man. I'm still trying to figure out, but like, here's what I've done so far. Like, here's what I've simmed for damage, and here's how I weighed everything, and you can interpret this your own way. So yeah, it's been cool. I hope to make a wide variety of YouTube content, both for people who are just starting to get into M+, and maybe for people who are kind of owning but want to be mega owning.
Yeah, I think that you're in this unbelievably good position where you're in this group that just takes hour-long breaks 3 times per day. So you just have this huge time to make content.
Yeah, it's like PUBG or anything where there's just so much downtime and you're just running from the next place, and you just interact with your chat and answer questions and stuff. So yeah, it's a perfect fit.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. So we'll talk a little bit more with Growl about about how he got here, and then we'll do our main topic this week. We'll talk about the corruption vendor a little bit, of course, because that is new from our last show. So there is certainly some discussion about that. Literally, the last time we had the show, my tip of the week was don't hoard your coalescing visions, and then just like so much has changed in the past 10 days, and also that was a really bad tip now, so don't have done that. And then we'll also talk about just the kind of general practice of moving from medium to high keys, which I think is, again, something that Growl has got a pretty good perspective on, and I think that we can all take stuff from it. So that's the plan for our show today. Before we get there, though, let's quickly, Tettles, why don't you give us an update on the status of our Twitter giveaway thing?
All right, so we've had, let me pull up this week. We've had almost 200 people sign up for our Twitter giveaway in the form of retweets. We've gotten a lot of new followers on our Twitter giveaway as well. It is running through Gleam. I believe it runs through May 26th, I want to say. So 3 days from now, 2 days from when this goes live on YouTube. So if you guys have not signed up on Gleam for the giveaway, make sure you do that. Of course, we are giving away an Epic Edition, a Heroic Edition, and a Base Edition of Shadowlands pre-order, and then 2 6-month game time rewards. So good luck with everybody for that.
Are hosts eligible for this giveaway?
No.
Damn it.
What about guests?
Yes. Guests are eligible.
Damn
Make sure you retweet it.
Hell yeah.
All right. So that's the giveaway. So everybody, good luck in that one. And let's go ahead and thank our supporters over at patreon.com. Thanks for the year of support, although I guess we started our Patreon a little bit less than a year ago, but still. Thanks for supporting our shows.
Also, before you read off the names, I want to give a big shout out to Paul. He did donate the base edition of the Shadowlands pre-order for a giveaway as well.
Ooh. Big shout out to Paul, then,
awesome.
who is of US Proudmoore and is the first name on our patron list. followed by King of Skills, VTech XD, Zuko, Ja, Drunk Swede from Legion of Lemmings, Argent Dawn EU, I Wish I Was Dratnos' Dino Pillow, thanks Dettles, Heltari, Ishio, Andrew Number 1, Chromed, Seraphicus, Trekkie, The Marsh Hare, Regulus, Never Nude, Chewy, Glory to the Trell Dorai, Coke Dog's Gopher, Zool54, Worgen 0, Dratnos' Main Basement Captive, Ryten the Supreme Tank of the Guild, Lufer, Can We Call Samrak the Fear Dude Scary Joe instead? LXIX thinks Workshop's soundtrack slaps. Salty Sunny, Daz Boot, the 7th best mage in the guild. Hey, that's still pretty good. Papa Dratnos made me full Dino Pack. That is our list of supporters there.
Pulling the Dino Pack is trapped this week. It's necrotic. Don't do that.
What? Dino Pack's fine.
On
it's
necrotic?
tyrannical. It's tyrannical.
It's necrotic.
It's tyrannical.
It's necrotic.
It's tyrannical. It's fine. Snap on, snap off.
It's also raging.
It's fine. You soothe. You guys aren't playing with soothes? You just push them below raging one at a time.
You ever been raging thrashed with 20 necrotic stacks?
That's why you can drop that, though. All 3 of those things cast, and you can easily drop stacks. It's easy. Frenzy Charge, Wild Thrash, Quick Shot or whatever, that's when you roll away and you drop your stacks. It's free.
All right, moving on.
I've been doing that in Atal this week, and we've timed like 1 out of 3 Atals 20s this week, so it's a pretty good ratio. we had this nice Atal where
I depleted an Atal 20 in 33 minutes or so.
Yeah. We had a nice Atal this week where we got to 100% mob count, and we were like, oh yeah, I guess we got to play some obelisks with the last boss, and then we looked at our map, and 3 obelisks still hadn't been activated. Just like, man. Our first trash pull of the dungeon was, we had a DK, and so we went right and did like this DK pull, which was awesome, where you like mind control one of the honor guards, and then you pull like everything else, and then you go into Nihilotha and you release the mind control, and it just goes away.
That's pretty sick.
It was very, very cool. But then that was the only obelisk we activated the whole run, and then we're at the end of the dungeon with like 6 minutes left, and we were like, what do we do? And then we ended up trying to 2 obelisk for Yasma, and it went south rapidly.
So it was Malthier and Blood of the Corruptor, and you killed the Tank Buster in the middle
we killed
of
the Tank
room,
Buster.
right?
We tried to do Blob Spider. We nearly did, but some people screwed up. That weren't me, so hate to see it.
Unlucky.
Kind of the story of my keys, if we're being honest.
Yeah, never Dratnos' fault.
Never my fault. Yeah. Let's move on to Growl. Let's talk a little bit with Growl about his perspective. So we already heard when we were talking about his kind of introduction about his history of characters, but let's talk a little bit about your philosophy about like choosing a class to play and choosing a spec. As somebody who's played this expansion as a Resto Shaman, a Mistweaver, a Resto Druid, a Paladin briefly until Dorky wouldn't invite you to the group. What's your philosophy on choosing a class to play and a spec to play in Mythic Plus?
Well, I think you have to be honest with yourself in terms of what your goals are. There are definitely a lot of people who have been playing WoW for, since the 1800s or whatever, and they love their class and they never want to play anything else. But if your goal is to be get cutting edge, for example, or to reach a certain IO score, to have certain keys timed, it's just going to be harder to do it if you're not a class that's more appealing, right? And so a lot of people will come in, I'm sure you get it a lot, Dratnos, of like, oh, I play Feral Druid, or oh, I play Enhancement Shaman, or I play Disc Priest or Holy Priest. Like, how do I get into groups? And it's just like, you're going to stunt your growth a little bit if you don't have friends or a guild to play with, because it's going to be so much harder to LFG. So I would recommend for anybody, even if your heart is in Enhancement Shaman or Holy Priest or whatever, that at least give the meta classes a try. Make a Resto Druid if you play healer, or make a rogue or a demon hunter or a mage, and just try it. Like, at the worst case scenario, you'll get into groups easy and you can build up some score on that class, and then at some point you can weasel back onto your Enhancement Shaman or whatever and try and find some keys there, because at least people know, okay, this guy's capable of doing 19 keys. But you have to keep in mind, from the perspective of the people who are making groups, like, you're in Group Finder, right? You're looking at a list of people, like, they don't hate you because you're an Enhancement Shaman or whatever, but if I see a Demon Hunter and he's got infinite gear, like I know Demon Hunter's easy. Like he's not going to mess that up. I want to invite that guy to my group because it's a good class and it's easy and we're can time this key. So it's just harder to get into groups if you don't play meta specs. And at the same time, I think it's good overall to just play other classes to improve. I know not everyone has the time to play a lot of classes, so it's not for everybody, but the more you play other classes and learn about the game, the better you're going to get, even if it's at your whatever class that you want to play.
So I have a question about that. Okay, so in MOBAs, generally, you're going to be advised to play like 1 or 2 characters and be able to like learn the fundamentals of like how you move around the map and like how you like for WoW, it would be you would learn the fundamentals of how to do the dungeon and how to be the best at like completing the dungeon and like learning that. But do you honestly believe that re-rolling to something that is a better class is going to give you more experience and being able to learn how to complete the dungeons?
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. Because well, it depends on what your limiting factor is, right? Let's say. So I've been talking to this guy who plays Holy Paladin. He has this group of friends who he's been playing with for 10 or 12 years in different games, and they log on and they do Mythic Plus together. If you're in that situation, you can play whatever you want, right? Because you don't need to find a group. You can just log on and play what you want to play and learn how to play it, and you're going to get tons of experience. But for 95% of the players, you may have only a handful of friends, right? Or you may have a guild that you quickly outgrow because just most guilds don't do that much Mythic Plus, and you're going to end up limited by the groups that you can get into. If you're someone who's, let's say you've had a lot of 15s and 16s timed and you play a non-meta spec, your options are, well, let me just keep spamming 14s because that's all I can get into, or I have to wait around an hour to get into a group that's a 17 or an 18. And even that group might not be ideal because it's, you know, some guy trying to carry his friend and it's a weekly no leaver, right? Because that's the only group you can get into. So if you find yourself in that situation where you can't get into groups and that's what's holding you back, that's why I suggest re-rolling, right? Because you're going to eliminate that barrier and get that experience. But if you're someone who has a group to play with or a guild, then no, you don't need to. You can play. That's the ideal setup, right? But not everyone has that, and it's really hard to get. So if you don't have that, if you don't have a main group, yeah, absolutely, re-rolling will help you get into groups and get experience. I know people don't want to hear it, but it's the truth, right? Anyone who plays Enhancement Shaman out there knows the difficulty of getting into a key, not even a key that score for them, but just a key to get their weekly 15 or 16 done or whatever.
Oh, absolutely. Dude, I'm like super detached from that too, because Moonkin is not that sick, but I just get invited purely based off of name value. And
like, here comes the clout brag. All right, go ahead.
Nerf Starfall.
Fuck off. But like
Moonkin
is not good, and it's hard for people to get invited to keys, and that's why if you want to keep playing Druid, I normally recommend people just fucking play Resto, because it's easy to get invited to keys as Resto.
I think playing Tank too. I think Tank is one exception where, because a tank is so unforgiving and it's hard for newer players if you're not as familiar, there's just such a big shortage of tanks from, let's say, 10 to 19 keys. So even if you're an off-meta tank, I would be fairly certain that you could find some groups to play with, or at the very least start your own as a tank. So even if, for instance, Guardian Druid isn't super popular, I think you'll have much better luck as a Guardian Druid or a Resto Druid than you would if you're a Feral Druid or a Boomy, that's for sure.
Absolutely. That's 100% true. There's so few tanks that you could play any class and get going into high keys if you put in the time. And also, like I've been playing recently on my Brewmaster, and I have a bunch of Holy Paladin friends that would whisper me sometimes I wanted to do keys. And even sometimes they invite me on Brewmaster, even though they know it's really, really difficult to heal a brew as Holy Paladin, because there's just such a shortage of Prot Warriors and Guardian Druids, which are really good, by the way.
Guardian Druids, wow. Tomobor here really shaking up the meta game, the Guardian Druid thing. Let's talk a little bit about that, because Growl, as somebody who's just gone on your thing about rolling to meta specs, of course you do have a fixed group where you do play with a Guardian Druid just all the time. What's your thought process on the whole Guardian Druid thing? Do you think that it's the best tank?
It's the best tank that I play with.
Okay.
That's for sure. I think so. An important factor is that skill is more important than anything in WoW. sort of like what Tettles was getting at when he was mentioning about being really good at your class. Absolutely, skill is like, I would much rather play with a world-class Guardian Druid than play with a like average or even good Prot Warrior, right?
Yoda
Because
WR,
I think
yeah.
at the end of the day,
Definitely.
the classes are not balanced, but the classes are not perfectly balanced, but they're still close enough that if you're a huge owner, that you can play almost anything that you want as long as you have the group around it. In terms of playing with Guardian, I think Guardian gets a bad rap because it's really squishy on pull. And so you see these clips of Tettles trying to play Bear where he just goes into a pull and gets globaled in a quarter of a second. And it's just like, wow, Bear is not good, right? But this is something that as you improve as a healer, it's really important. But I think it's important for everyone, if you want to get better in the game, is understanding how all the tanks work. And it's not that cut and dry of, oh, a Guardian Druid needs way more healing, they suck at tanking, right? It's just all the tanks are structurally different in how they perform. So like Warrior, for example, everyone's really familiar with Warrior. Warrior presses Avatar and they're invulnerable because of Bastion of Might, and then they run into a pull and they take no healing. So it seems like Warriors are invulnerable. Whereas Bear is the opposite, and they require rage generation, and they need to get in there and be hitting mobs and thrashing to build Earth Warden stacks and to get fur up. So it's just structurally different in how they perform. Like you need to be ready to heal a Bear right away on pull, but it's actually can be better than a Prot Warrior, for example, as the pull goes on, because eventually with a Warrior, Avatar is going to fall. They have to rely on shield block charges. A Bear, because they are relying on only rage generation, they're just, as long as they can hit mobs, they're really tanky, right? So
yeah, they just get stronger and stronger.
Yeah, it's just different how the tanks play. And I think understanding how each tank works is super, super important, because that's part of the reason that people are saying that Bears aren't good, is because you don't understand Bear. So who knows, maybe like a Demon Hunter stunning all the mobs and the healer using bark on the tank on pull will give that Bear the extra couple seconds to be tanky, and then you won't even notice that you have a Bear if you just play around it. So I'm definitely not going to say Bear is the best tank, but I think it's just structurally different from the other tanks. The thing that I think makes Bear a little bit worse than Warrior or Brewmaster is just the damage. Warrior just does an insane amount of damage, and they have almost no threat problems even during skittish weeks. And while Brewmaster doesn't have that AoE damage, they bring the Mystic Touch debuff. So if you watch
that's true.
If you watch the boss times of Andy Brew's team versus any other team, they just kill bosses faster, right? Because with single target damage, most of it's going to be physical. So the only really reason I would want to play with the tank other than a Bear is because they do more damage and they time the key faster. But I'm never sitting here thinking like, man, we have a Bear, he died. Like if we had a Warrior, he would have lived there. Like that's absolutely not how it works.
Yeah, that's a good mindset to have. It's really good to hear how much knowledge you have, Growl, as a healer about all these different tank classes. That's so rare in the community, and I applaud you for that.
It's really important as any class. Like Tettles plays Boomkin. Me and Tettles actually talked about this a little bit when we first started playing together. As a Boomkin, it's important too, right? Like if you understand how tanks work and you know when you need to drop Treants, or as a Demon Hunter, you know when you have to stun and when you have to hold off on threat. Like everything that goes on in a dungeon is revolving around the tank. And if you're going to understand any one person in your group, it should be the tank.
I have a question, Growl. So having played with the Blood DK a little bit this season as well, how do you feel about that class compared to the illustrious Guardian Druid, Brewmaster Monk? And
so as a healer, and I don't mean to say this to make all the Blood DK sad out there, but I really hate healing Blood DK. Not because it's bad, although it's not very good. The problem is just that I have no agency in healing it. Like a Blood DK's life is fully in its own hands, and I think that's why a lot of tank players like Tomobor, or who I may refer to as Dorky, and like now, for example, love Blood DK, is because your life is fully in your hands. Like as a Brewmaster, Trell, I'm sure you can relate. You go into a pull and you're taking a lot of damage, and it's like, well, I pressed Iron Skin Brew. Like I hope my healer's cranking me right now. But as a Blood DK, you can save yourself. As a Blood DK, your health is flying everywhere. I have no control over whether or not you live. Like when I play with Dorky's Blood DK, he's beating me in HPS by like a factor of 3 on every single pull. Like it doesn't, I just put hots on him and I just, you know, I hope he lives here. Like there's not much I can do. So it's like, it could be good, but it's just, as a healer, it's tough to work around compared to like a bear or a prot warrior or even a brew.
I think that sentiment is definitely not. It's definitely not your. It's definitely shared. A lot of people feel that way about healing blood DKs. They just feel like, you know, it looks the same when they're about to die and when they're totally fine on their health bar, and both times they just go from 100 to 10, and you just don't know if they're about to go back to 100 or all the way down to 0.
You have to watch runic power though, right?
I mean, you can, but like it's also just like, you know, this situation is going to happen to them 100 times. Like which time are they going to make a mistake and die?
Yeah, true. That is also fair.
All right.
I think you have to play with the Blood DK like an enormous amount of time to really know when they need the healing. I think good Blood DK's players become really consistent, and they can tell their healer like, hey, I'm going to be out of runic power here. I'll probably need healing for these 5 seconds, and I'll try to also outrange during that time and all that. But yeah, it's really tough for healers, I feel.
Yeah, it's tough for Blood DK as well, because like if you don't have stuff, like there's no amount of healing that's going to keep you up through the damage you're taking on that spec. It's you can't get saved by like regrowths in the way that
I think what Trell said is really important. I get a lot of people in my chat about asking about the bear, because no, the bear does not stream and they come looking for him. But if I could give one comment to like all the bears and blood DKs of the world, it's that you have to have that good line of communication with your healer so that they understand, right? Like it might be a little hard because you're trying to play your own class and you're trying to tank and you're trying to control all these mobs. But if you have that line of communication with your healer, like you have to give them a little leeway. You know, they're not going to be big nerds like me who look through every cooldown and understand how the classes work, right? You might need to explain to them as a blood DK, like, okay, when I have vamp blood up, like that's not a defensive, that means I get more healing. So when you see vamp blood, you kind of want to make sure you have hots on me, because like I'm relying on you to heal me when my vamp blood's up. Or as a bear, like, hey, just every time I go into a pull, if you have bark up, just use it on me. Don't wait for me to ask for it, you know? And I feel like you'll have a lot better of experience in pugging keys if you have that communication with your healer and you explain to them, you know, you don't have to babysit them and hold their hand, but at least give them maybe a few tips on what it's like to heal your class, because they've probably 90% of the time have healed prot warriors or brewmasters, right? So when you get into a key with a healer and you're a blood DK or a bear, they probably barely know how your class works.
Barely.
Yeah,
that mirrors our advice actually from a couple weeks ago. We were talking about playing off meta specs, and like one of the things you have to do is really just, you know, the onus is on you to make sure the group knows what you do and like, you know, knows how your master spell matters for a pull, or you know what the positive and negative things you bring are. Otherwise, you're just gonna like part of the reason that the meta specs are so good is that everybody already knows those things, so you need to close that gap. All right, let's move on, though, to our tip of the week segment, and then we will talk a little bit more about the state of the game. And, of course, as needed, we'll come back to Growl's wisdom on the key situation and the key scene. But first, my tip of the week actually comes from something I learned from watching twitch.tv/YummyTV. There's a weak aura you can get on the Cujo fight that will put an icon on your screen when you're hiding behind the junk box. So I'll put it in chat as well, and I'll try to remember to put it in the YouTube description. Although, look, there's a chance that I'll forget to put this in the YouTube description. So if I do that, it's just on the Weak Aura site, and you search "hiding behind junk," and it's just this. It's a buff on you when you're hiding behind the crate. That it looks like a subtlety rogue icon, a stealth icon, and if you have this buff on you, that means you're not going to take damage from venting flames. If you don't, it means you're going to die to it. And you can use this to pre-position yourself and make sure that you have line to the boss, and the boss doesn't have line to you.
So for a while, the box, like, it gave you an invisible buff. So now they recently changed the boxes to WoW to where they give like actual like physical buffs now that you can actually see. So you can just use your buff and debuff window, but this week or that Dratnos is showing you guys very, very useful.
All right, our next tip comes from Trell. What's your tip, Trell?
My tip is for all the tanks up there. The Versatile 3 is currently on the Corruption Vendor that was implemented this week. If you don't have any, or if you only have 2 to 3, you should probably stock up while you can. You won't see this rotation again for 6 weeks, I believe.
4.
And Versatile 3, 4 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's a little better, but still kind of long. You should get as much versatile threes as you can get. I think having 6 to 7 will be good for the long term. Having 1 Surging Vitality will be a good choice as well later on, and then also buying like a Twilight Dev 2 and a Twilight Dev 3 as an option for some dungeons is also going to be the play.
What about what rank of Surging Vitality do you like?
1 Surging Vitality rank 3.
Okay.
I think is most efficient, and because our corruption resistance is going to be so high, I don't think you want to waste any corruption on like rank 1s if you can help it, because we're going to run out of equipment slots to put corruption on eventually.
Yeah, that's an important thing as well for corruption sets, is like, you know, there are classes that are going to run all, 20 corruption stuff, all the stat stuff, and at some point you're going to have enough corruption resistance that you might even switch to like less corruption efficient but more slot efficient, 35 corruption racing pulses instead of 20 corruption expedients, potentially. Yeah. All right, let's move on now to Growl's tip of the week, which is a clip as well.
Yeah, I'll talk about it first if you want to pull it up.
Sure, I'll play it. Yeah, I'll play it muted.
Every time I do this on stream, people are like, "Whoa, what the heck? I didn't know you could do this." So in the last boss of Temple, when you're healing, well, you can do it at any point, but there are frogs that jump around that if you step on the frogs, you get a debuff that reduces your healing by an insane amount. And some classes like Druid can't dispel that debuff. So if you get that debuff, you may just be dead. But I've found out, and by I found, I mean someone told me, there's safe spots around the room. You can stand on top of these weird candle things, and the frogs don't hit you. They just jump under you, and then they sit there. So especially when you're in pugs, because people are more worried about acquiring overall than helping you as a healer, you may find yourself surrounded in frogs like it's the plague. And if you jump on one of these candles, you can just not worry about the frogs until your team gets to them. But be warned that it does not protect you from any other ground effects. So for example, the lightning bolts that go out during the boss, that will hit you if you're up there. You're only protected from the frogs when you stand there. And I linked a clip to Dratno so you can show it on stream.
Yeah.
So
I've chased you around as well when you've been on this thing and baited the swirlies and exploded the frogs under you as well.
Yeah, I didn't have that clip.
If the frogs get exploded underneath you, it will splash and give you the debuff, right?
No. You can kill the frogs and it won't give you the debuff.
Oh, if you kill them, but what if you soak them?
As far as I know, well, the thing is they won't explode, I think. I've never gotten the debuff when I'm on the candles. So generally what happens is I jump on the candles because you're a healer, you pull threat on all the frogs immediately. That's why all the frogs are running to you as a healer. And then they'll just stand under you. And they have very low health. So usually just a major demon hunter comes along and just kills them when they see them. But I'm not sure. Maybe if someone runs under it and steps on them. But I've never been affected by the debuff when I'm standing up there before.
Yeah, gotta love these... Gotta love the candles as well. This is like a season 4 candles from the Awakened Affix in this last boss room.
I was gonna say, like, I never noticed that, but then I realized it was the season 4 Affix that made that possible. So,
all right. Cool. US Second Tank Nerf Tank TV says the lightning doesn't target healers, so you safe up there until you get griefed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess I was playing with Dratnos and he walked on top of me.
I did.
That's why
I was like, oh, what are you doing over here? I come hang out with you. And then baited the swirlies on you. All right, let us advance now to Tettles' clip of the week, which I assume got linked to him rapidly after it happened.
Yes, immediately.
All right, this is from yesterday. Okay, all right, here we go.
Lindsay, yay.
Going forward though.
Oh. Hidden.
You guys are all dead. You guys are definitely dead. You guys are
I'm not kidding.
Someone jumped over here. I'm speed.
Man, I hit him with Earthbiter.
I saw that coming the moment you pressed all.
Did you just do what I think you did?
Man.
That has to have happened to at least one person, like, no matter what, throughout this season one time. Like, you die, you enter, or you're late and you enter the obelisk, and then you immediately die.
It can happen on so many of them as well.
The scarabs, dude.
The scarabs,
The scarabs, yeah.
Mm-hmm. My stupid group, man. I hit him with Rockbiter weapon and got hit by the Spirit Breaker.
Why are you playing Enhance?
Memes. Okay. Damage. Growl hadn't told me not to yet. I hadn't come on the show yet. and had Growl tell me
well,
not
me
to.
and Dratnos worked out a deal where I would do his weekly no lever on every single character he had back to back to back in 20 keys, and I would be allowed on the podcast. So that was key number 6 or 7 that day.
Hold on, I invited you before you agreed into this blood pact with Dratnos. Please.
Wait, what? So I just did all those keys for nothing?
What Echoes of Nihilotha, man? Those things are valuable. Okay, speaking of why Echoes of Nihilotha are valuable, let's have our podcast talk about the Corruption Vendor, because again, this is entirely, I can't believe that this is entirely new from our last show. It feels like this has been the world for so long now, but it's all happened so fast that we've had this Corruption Vendor come out. So it came out with the blue post, and in this blue post they had all these like problems where it was like, you know, oh, it's not going to work on your purified items. Oh, it's going to come later in the week. Oh, you know, blah, 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 blah. And like all of those were fixed within like 2 days, which was surprisingly fast. So now the entire thing is online and it works well, and you can corrupt your crafted items. You can corrupt previously cleansed items. They're nerfing Gushing Wounds by 35% before it shows up on the vendor. What do you guys think about that one?
That feels bad.
Why? Like, you add the vendor to be able to allow everybody to have whatever corruption they want. Then you nerf the one that's overperforming. Yet their Twilight Devastation is still okay.
Well, the thing about Gushing Wound, I think, is that there would be like maybe half the specs stacking it, especially for raid.
Okay, and 100% of the tanks play Twilight Dev.
Not 100%. Tanks have a very interesting decision of how much versatile and how much Twilight Dev do I play.
In raid.
In raid? Yeah, I mean, in raid, you play...
In raid, they can actually play Mind Flay,
yeah,
so at least there is options.
Echoing Void even for single. Like, there's actually quite a bit of variance between what tanks play. Like, Gushing Wound, if Gushing Wound makes it onto the vendor, then... in its previous state, I think that what you'd see a lot of people with Gushing Wound on all their slots, and then the problem is, okay, Blizzard decides in a month that they want to nerf Gushing Wound after seeing 70% of players with Gushing Wound on all their items, having spent 4,000 echoes on each of them. I think people would be pretty unhappy if the nerf came in at that point. So I think it was a good call to nerf this thing before everybody bought it rather than after. I don't know, Growl, I know you have a different take on whether things should ever get nerfed, ever. Or do you feel different on this one?
I think a lot of the times when people question the decisions that they make, it's usually because it's just way too late. Like, for example, Gushing Wounds, like, I guess it was by design that they had a corruption that was super rare and then obviously the best for almost every spec, but it doesn't work in a system with a vendor, right? So it sort of makes sense that they nerfed it, but at the same time, it's like, why did such a thing exist anyway in the first place for so long? That it was basically better than Infinite Stars on single target.
Yeah,
and it's like,
you really.
A lot of people ask. That's another thing that gets asked. I think for healers, it's still good, especially for Resto Druid, because the proc rate scales with haste, but very likely for other healers as well. It's probably still going to be used even after the nerf. I plan on buying a couple whenever it comes up in the vendor.
Yeah, so this is, interestingly, it's like a relative nerf to the specs that we're going to use it, which means it's a relative buff to BM Hunter, Fire Mage, you know, all
DK,
DPS
Death Knights,
specs that were already interested in like stat corruptions instead of Gushing Wound. So it's a bit of a nail in the coffin for some specs like Windwalker and stuff, which I think Gushing Wound was like their only thing they could find that did any damage, and that is definitely, like, I have some sympathies for that situation, but I think that on the whole, nerfing the corruption that everybody was going to use is probably a good thing. I think it does highlight though how much, like, it was a problem in the previous system as well that was just hidden by how rare this thing was, but there was just like Abyss corruption that you could Titanforge, that was so, you know, so good, and you know, once it becomes available for everybody, they have to be like, okay, this is actually be broken. So those people who just got lucky and got 2 or 3 Gushing Wound pieces, like, we're so ahead.
Okay, so they're buffing and nerfing corruptions currently. Do you think that they should be buffing and nerfing classes still then?
Yeah, well, I think that it would have been. I think that this would have been a good time to be like, all right, let's do a balance patch. You know, let's do Fire Mage down 5%, BM Hunter down 5%. You know,
yeah.
let's get these nerfs in. I mean, the best time to do those nerfs was Heroic Week. The second best time is now. But
I think in general, WoW and almost every other game is just always way too slow with rolling out balance changes. I think they're too worried about the logistics of them, and I know they have to, convert the patch notes to 1 million languages and do a bunch of builds and testing. But I feel like the game would feel so much more fresh, and people would enjoy their classes a lot more if they just had a little more love and care to the balance in between these long shifts. Like think about how many people that that have come back to the game or are playing the game more because of the corruption vendor, right? And it was such a low effort thing. Like it was such an easy thing that they just dropped in. Like if they spent more time and did more changes like that, I feel like people would enjoy the game a lot more.
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
of the opinion of that they should be rolling out balance patches like once a month. I think that's what we've decided that would be a little bit better. But
the thing is, like, I understand that for a lot of players, you play your one character, you invest quite a bit of time into it, you don't have the time to invest into another character, your thing gets nerfed, and it's just like it's devastating for you. Like, we talk about, you think about the sentiment around Blood Death Knight, for instance, right? Like if you ask people what they thought about the Blood Death Knight nerfs that came in like 8.1, most people now would be like, yeah, this sucks. Why did Blizzard nerf this class this hard? This is really stupid. But like if you go back to then, like Blood DK was dominant tank in Legion, and it was the dominant tank in Season 1 of BFA, and it was looking like it was just going to be the Mythic Plus tank forever. And I think that they had a good reason to nerf it. And could they have nerfed it a little bit less? Maybe, but if we were in a world of rapid iteration on balance, like necessarily sometimes they would nerf things too much, sometimes they'd nerf them too little, and like if people would get unhappy about that a lot.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I'm pretty sure Protection Warrior is still the best tank in Season 1. People just didn't play it.
Dude, Ignore Pain was on the GCD.
It doesn't matter. Like that class was still the best at dealing with physical mitigation by like a mile.
Blood DK was fine at it though. You had armor back then.
Maybe.
But yeah, I don't know. I think that
no comment.
If I was in charge at Blizzard, I would do like once you get your key above 20 or whatever, it instead turns into like a slightly different game mode. And in that slightly different game mode, there's there's fast acting balance changes that happen to classes in those keys. And outside of that game mode, things stay roughly the same and don't change patch to patch.
But would that not like separate like normal live players too much from like generally the Mythic Plus community? I feel like that would. I don't know. I feel like you would be playing almost a completely different game. It's like the issue with templating in PvP, where it's like you're not playing the same game as everybody else.
Well, PvP has the PvP changes, right? Like the spells work differently in PvP, right? Like
exactly.
Fury is like minus 50% or whatever, or something like that. They do those targeted spell nerfs and buffs in PvP as needed, and I think you could do that in Mythic Plus as well, and just like do it at a level that's high enough where people aren't affected by it, and people don't have their progression impacted by it.
I think a lot of it comes down to. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Growl.
Okay, I think a lot of it comes down to encounter design too. What I thought you were going to say when you were talking about keys above level 20 is you more fine tune the encounter design as well. Like the differences between the earlier seasons and this season is the seasonal affix, right? And that there's actually so much single targeting that's done, and there's actually so much utility that you get from like having single target damage. It's just better. It's not necessarily rogues are terrible now, right? Or they got nerfed, or demon hunters are worse now, but they've just changed the way that Mythic Plus performs just slightly to kind of favor, okay, it's not so bad if most of your damage is single target. Like I think a lot of classes are not even that bad right now, but it's just sort of the stigma that arises because they were worse earlier. But I think they could do more love and care to the like super high keys too, to make it so just whatever encounters that you're facing, like it's like you feel good for having these classes, like you can kind of see they tried it a little bit. Like for example, the what was his name? Scary Joe, your Patreon wanted it.
Oh,
yeah.
If you have, so for example, if you have Tremor Totem or you have Revival or you have Mass Dispel, right? Those are all very not meta classes, but that mob, it feels like was almost specifically kind of, okay, let's throw something into Mythic Plus. So when you have these non-meta classes, it feels good. You're like, man, it feels good to have Revival here. It feels good to have Mass Dispel. And I feel like if they just shift the encounter design a little bit and try and work around the classes that aren't as popular, they can actually balance it that way so that they don't have to, nerf classes or change the way skills work. They instead change the way the dungeon works so that the classes feel better.
But how would you do that without making some of that shit mandatory? Like,
it's hard. There's definitely a fine line. It takes a lot of effort, but we're not talking about an indie developer. These are some of the best minds in game design that they have behind WoW. Like, I think if they have a lot of really smart people and they can put together that, it definitely isn't easy. Like, I agree with you. It's difficult to make it not feel mandatory, but I think in combination with a little bit more regular balance changes to the dungeons and to classes with more care and thought out into encounter design, or maybe specific encounter design for 20 plus keys. Like, I don't want to say more affixes, but I haven't quite been able to articulate exactly what I think should happen, but I do feel like what Dradno said about how keys above 20 perform differently in some way, I think would be important, both for like balance and also for rewards too, right? Like if you're doing 21 keys and 22 keys, like the game doesn't care. Like there's no reason to do a 22 key in game. There's no leaderboard, there's no rewards, there's no anything. Like you get your 15 achievement and then that's it. Like you're doing it for RaiderIO score. But I think for 20 plus keys, they should separate it and do more for rewards for those two.
I think Growl brought up a great example on how to make non-meta classes more viable but not required. And Tuttles was asking how to make that not required. And so like the Samurai, the Beckoner example where you go into the pillar and you get 3 things that need to be dispelled by the healer, but the healer can only dispel 1 at a time. Having a Shadow Priest or Revival from a Mistweaver or Tremor Totem from a Wrestle Shaman can solve
Warlock
that.
Imps,
like,
guys, come on, Warlock Imps.
Yeah, Warlock too. All those classes can make that mechanic feel really good, but they aren't mandatory because you could also just dispel 1 with the healer and then let a couple go off with defensives. So that kind of mechanic is really good for the game. I think another example of what they could have done was in King's Rest, the tank guys in the first boss room have an Enrage that scales infinitely. And if they would have made that have a timer and just fall off after like 5 or 6 seconds, so that if you had a soothe, it made it easier, but not mandatory to have a soothe. I think that would be a good way to solve that.
It isn't mandatory to have a soothe the same way it's not mandatory where Samrek needs triple dispel. Like, I think that Enrage is literally just the the ultimate thing with what you're talking about of not falling off, where it doesn't like completely wipe you if he's enraged for a little bit, but it's definitely hard to deal with, and you really want an enraged dispel.
I mean, if it's enraged permanently, then that kind of does hamper some tank's ability to just survive that mob on a certain key level. Like if it enrages twice, a Blood Decay can never tank that guy again.
Yeah, you can't take a auto for sure.
So, but
you can still
win. What if Druid's not the meta class?
Then yeah, you'd kite it full time. So it's technically not mandatory now, but my point was it'd be more balanced, and it would still feel good to have a soothe, but it would be more balanced for the other classes if they didn't have a soothe.
Yeah.
I think what you guys are saying is mostly the same thing. It's more that Tuttles thinks that it's a little bit too overboard, right? Like there's a fine line between making it be like, okay, I'm glad that I have a druid here, to okay, we can't invite this paladin, we need to have a druid. Like they have to be careful as they walk that line, and they have to make sure that every ability or skill that they craft that has a counter that isn't available to everyone. Like, so for example, you have to be really careful with making poisons and diseases, right? Because or curses, because not all healers can dispel those. So if you make a curse, I get it that it could, like, you want it to feel good. Okay, we have a curse to spell, but it can't be like, okay, well, I'm just sitting a 12-second sheep now on the bridge of King's Rest because we don't have a curse to spell. Like, there's a line that they have to walk and be careful when they make things like that, for sure.
Well, the obvious counter to that is like kicking, but okay, for me, like enrages in general, not every class is an enraged dispel. What the fuck are you gonna do against enraged Shadow of Zul or enraged Ludwig or
Dude,
whatever?
Raging Shadow of Zul, man.
Yeah, those are really good examples. Those should not be able to be enraged.
I went into King's Rest this week, and Shadow of Zul got large, and then I had a druid that suits it. But I was just thinking, like, what was I going to do if I was in a group with that? Like, the key was like a 20. Like, the tank was dead in one Shadow Barrage. If that thing is enraged, like, it's over.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, man. This is crazy. Shadow Zul in particular, like, that's the kind of thing that I'd love to see if there was a mode where, you know, there was fine balance tuning above a certain level as well. Like, you just hit Shadow Zul with a big ol' not scaling up
damage nerf.
Yeah, I mean, you just it just scales up like 1% damage and health per level instead of any more above 20, something like that. All right. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other effects of this corruption vendor and the other changes that they made. So there's some cloak catch up for alts, where alts can do every quest to level your cloak up to 15 is now doable in one go. But there is still this Malefic Core catch up issue where every week that passes is another week of the alts having to do N'Zoth and or Horrific Vision to catch up to a fully leveled cloak. So if you start a character right now, it'll take you until about mid-July to be caught up on your Malefic Cores. And every month that passes is another month that gets added to that grind. So we're kind of closing in, like, right now is when you'll have to start a character to be viable, like, right at the very end of the expansion. And if you start it, but you know, viable, I guess, is you know, the question is, how much do you care about 40 corruption resistance? And the answer to that question really depends on how smart you are. If you're stupid, you might not think that matters. But it's a lot of corruption resistance.
Do you think that they're going to give a catch up for the Malefic Cores?
I am not sure, but I think that there's a lot of the argument that I see right now is that it doesn't matter. And that is something, like, clearly it does matter. I think that it's reasonable to say, hey, look, mains are stronger than alts, and that's, you know, if you started a character in February, it's going to be stronger than a character started in June. And, like, okay, I understand that, but let's not pretend that 50 corruption resistance doesn't matter. Like, let's not pretend that Twilight Dev Tier 2 isn't extremely powerful for free.
Per corruption, like, corruption gives you about 100 to 150 damage per point, depending on your class, depending on what corruption you're getting. So yeah, 50 corruption resistance, you can run the math on that. Pretty big deal.
Yeah, and so it depends. Like, you know, should alts be able to complain about that kind of catch up that they're behind by? I don't know. It doesn't really bother me. I got 10 characters at capped cloak that just do my vision each week on them, and they're staying capped because I saw this coming. But if I was Blizzard, I would definitely be adding, like, you know, you can get 4 cores per week from visions as a change, and then just, you know, you're caught up in a couple weeks.
I think that's a good idea.
I don't know if you guys have any strong opinions on that, or else we can move on to our final topic of the day.
I think they just made the game a lot more alt friendly with the corruption finish, so it's kind of weird that the Malefic Cores are going to gate people's alts really heavily, especially to the point where it's like they're not going to be caught up until what is effectively the end of the expansion. It's kind of strange, but I get that you need to, like, actively play your character to get it to the same power level as your main, like, because there's supposed to be a dichotomy between mains and alts.
Yeah, to me, it's just the time gate on it that's
I hate that. Yeah,
like, you know, you could play your character really hard for 3 weeks and you're still just there's no extra progress you can make on those Malefic Cores.
Yeah.
All right. The problem is that it's locked to raid. I have no way of getting one from last boss. LFR is not going to get through that boss. You can't even get it from LFR. Yeah, you gotta get a normal or heroic N'Zoth. So that's like why. That's one of the really tough things, is because a lot of alts, like, aren't really in a position to be doing N'Zoth as well, which it does feel pretty punishing for people that care about that. But, you know, on the other hand, I guess you should have seen this coming and made your alt sooner, I guess. I don't know. Let's talk about moving from medium to high keys. That is our kind of big topic here with Growl. I guess we've already been going for a while, so this is our next
2-hour episode. Yeah, it'll be fine.
That's our next topic here with Growl. So, I guess the first thing we have here, you know, there's really a large group of people that come into streams, you know, all the time and are asking, like, hey, how do I go from 15s and 16s to 18s? How do I go from 18s and 19s to 22s? How do I go from 21s and 22s to 25s? Those are all different steps of this process. And, you know, oftentimes these are people who are, like, pretty good at their class. You know, they have a pretty solid understanding of how to do their damage buttons, and how to do their healing buttons and those kinds of things. And you know, it's a lot of the other moving parts around Mythic Plus, I think, that are the problem variables, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of Mythic Raiders, I'm sure, in all of our guilds where it's like, if they put in the time and the effort, they would absolutely be able to do top level keys. They are competent Mythic Raiders, but like if they're starting out on their own, they would be stuck at that 16, 17, 18 window. And they are like, and you look at their logs, they're parsing really well in Mythic. They know how to do their damage well, but it's definitely the extracurricular stuff like Dretness was saying.
All right, so the first thing we're going to bring up here is a concept known as bear routing. Growl, what is the bear route?
I'm glad that this made it on here. It's something that it's hard for me to preach this because this is something that I did wrong a lot, and Dorky Tomobor like completely broke me of this over the course of the last few months playing with him. And it's that you just have to do stuff in anything, right? Whether it's keys or raid or real life or whatever you're doing, like you just have to do stuff to learn and try and get better. Like you can never be focused on this, okay, this one moment. How do I time this one key, right? Because if you're doing in a 17 in a group finder, that might mean go through the dungeon in a straight line, and as long as you don't die, you time the key, right? But one of the things that we do as a group, and I think this might be a little bit specific to people who already have groups, because it's a little bit dangerous to do in group finder, but once you kind of found your you got your groove going, you have your group of friends that you're playing with, actually take yourself out of your comfort zone and try stuff. Like if there's something that you see Andy Brew's group or Nerfs group do, don't just say, oh, well, man, Yoda's way better than our Demon Hunter, we can't do that. Like you just try it, because you never know what happens. And when you try really, really hard stuff, it's almost like a weightlifting effect, right? Where when you bench your 1 rep max, now when you go down to 85% for your working set, it's like, wow, this is actually not that bad. Like you don't actually lift like that, but you kind of get the analogy, right? So one of the things we do as a group is we always just do crazy stuff. Like, what if we try and do 3 obelisks with the last boss, but it's actually a 25 key? Like, what if we pull these 2 packs? Like, how do we pull these 2 packs together when no one else does it? And don't be afraid of trying just crazy stuff, right? Like just because you don't need to do it to time a key doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. Like you should focus on this. And again, right, this is a little more specific to groups, but you shouldn't just focus on how do I time this one key. You should focus on how do I get really good? How do we improve our group coordination so that the thing about Mythic Plus 2 is that it's not really defined by which group is better at going perfect through a dungeon. A lot of people make a comment about our group like, man, every time anything goes wrong in your group, the saves that you guys make are crazy. Like it'll be the tank dies and then the Demon Hunter will taunt one mob and I'll taunt another, and then I'll be spamming root on the third, and then someone will release, and then our rogue will run back and vanish and sap so the tank can get through, and all this crazy stuff. And you don't get this ability to think on your feet when you're just staying in your comfort zone all the time.
Well,
it's true.
I think it also I think playing obelisks with final bosses is just a great example of that. I think that is one of the biggest time saves, especially on this patch. And sure, you could be timing dungeons. Okay, so like let's take Volzith for example. I've watched you guys play Blood of the Corruptor with Volzith, and I sit there and I look at that. I'm like, that is just psycho. But it's not like overly dangerous. But if you make a mistake individually, you're going to die very quickly. But the amount of time that it saves by playing the Blood of the Corruptor with Volzith is going to be fairly large. So you kind of have to pick your battles in that regard too. And I guess for me, it comes down to what you really want. Do you want to time that key in the moment, or do you want to learn as a group like how to get better?
Yeah, it's about the long run, right? You guys are practicing for like 29s, 30s down the road, not just for that 26 shrine you're doing in that moment. Yep. I totally agree with everything Growl's saying.
Yeah, this is very much something that I think is part of the reason why groups are so important. You know, consistent groups in Mythic Plus is you don't get the benefit of practicing these things as much if you're pugging, right? Like to some extent, if you're a pug tank, you can try these big pulls, but like it's really about the learned experience of the whole group, and you know, learning all these things together. That is part of why Mythic Plus is such a, like, all the top teams basically play with each other, and like, you know, maybe there's some groups have a rogue spot that they fill randomly, some groups have a Demon Hunter slot that they fill randomly, but for the most part, it's, you know, this core of people that have a built up history of doing this dungeon, you know, with a bunch of different things and a bunch of different things going wrong 100 times, and then they pull that forward and they have that every time, and that's why the groups are so, you know, set in the high level groups. All right, how about attitude? Let's talk a little about this. This is something that we've discussed a couple times actually when we talked about how to get better at Mythic Plus. This is almost always something that is at least a part of the show, and I think that this is a big thing that in not just Mythic Plus but in gaming in particular, and gaming in general, players do, like, you have an opportunity with your mindset to be improving, and you have an opportunity to not be improving with your mindset as well. And it's very important to, you know, pick the right one of those.
Yeah, so I think with attitude, it's not just about improving yourself too, but it kind of goes back to what I was talking about being invited to groups as a limiting factor to your improvement. A lot of people who are at that level, 18s and 19s, they can really relate to that of, well, yeah, I can go into a 15 key and I can slam it, right? But is that really going to make me a better player? And eventually you reach a point where you can't just pug keys in Group Finder, right? Like, you get a little bit spoiled when you're coming up because, 17 Waycrest, I need this for score, and you join and you time it and it's not too bad, and then you move on. But eventually it gets to a point where you can't get a 21 Temple in Group Finder, or if you can, it's really rare, right? So what do you do? How do you get past that? And it becomes a game of not just getting better, but also networking, right? You need to have not just a regular group, because a lot of people ask, okay, how do I find a regular group? It's not so much that, but it's more the networking aspect of how do I have people that are really good on my friends list that I can invite to my keys, and also that they'll invite me to their keys. And it becomes not just about how good am I, because let's be honest, I feel like a lot of people aren't really that good at analyzing how good other people are they're playing with, because they're focusing on their own role. Mm-hmm. But it's about being a good person to play with. So, for example, when I'm in a group, this is a little specific to healer, but it's true for everybody. You have to be a good person to play with. You have to be doing things that are helping your team, and they will notice that, right? Like, no one's going to notice that, oh man, I'm a sick gamer, like I'm doing so much damage and so much healing, like I own. Like, no one really cares about that, but people notice the small things where you're interacting with them. You know, Mythic Plus is a team game, so when the Demon Hunter is in meta right now, I'm going to try and help him. Like, maybe someone's slowed in a frontal. Let me knock that frontal out of the way so it stops it. Or as a healer, the mage is combusting. Let me dispel the mage right now. And a tip that I learned is let them know you're doing it too, right? Like, some people might not notice everything, but if you say that, like, it goes a long way. Like, I'm not trying to build up your ego or anything, but let him know, be like, hey man, I'll dispel you because you're in combust, right? I don't say that because, like, I'm saying that because I specifically want him to know, like, hey dude, I'm seeing what you're doing and I want to help you do that. And people will notice that a lot more. Like, maybe the rogue has a 5 buff. Don't worry, I'll go cage that mob. You got a 5 buff. Just keep slamming. Don't leave combat. You know, be aware of what your team's doing and help them out, because people appreciate that. And then in turn, people are going to invite you, right? They're going to want to be your friend when they see you do that sort of stuff. A lot of people are like, I'm doing 19s. If only I could do the same damage that Yoda does, then I could do 24s. But people don't invite Yoda because he does insane damage. People invite him because he's an insane player and he works with the group and he's really smart and he's fun to play with.
Yeah. Like, some other great examples, calling kicks for your group, and like having it, like, if you're the person with the auto marker set up and you're assigning kicks to everybody and then you're calling the kicks as well, very important. There's also stuff like, as Growl was saying, it may be healer specific, but baiting sharks on Trothak and Freehold, or baiting the Guano on Sky Captain Crag and Freehold. Like, those are things that are very important to the group's success a lot of the time, that are just like undocumented. But if you kind of make it known, be like, right as you're about to pull, be like, all right, I got all the sharks, or all right, I'm going to bait the poop every single time. That allows people to know, and if you're calling kicks, they'll definitely hear that you're calling kicks. And if you, maybe not as a healer, if you're calling kicks as a healer, the only person I've ever seen do that is Dorky, but like, that would be the most insane shit if you're calling kicks as a healer.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. It's very noticeable. There's just a lot of stuff that you should announce to your group that you do, especially if you're a quieter person. Let them know that you're doing that stuff so they know you're a really good player and also a team player. Like I will tell my healer in King's Rest and the Gauntlet every time, hey, I'll dispel the poison, save your globals for damage or whatever. It gives me versatility every time I dispel it.
Also, like,
and it also helps the group.
So Dorky in chat saying which players would call their stops. This is hugely true as well. Like, if you cast your Fel Eruption or whatever, and somebody else is also using a stop on the same mob because they don't know that you're casting Fel Eruption on it, you didn't do anything useful there. Like you didn't help. You didn't stop anything, right? Like it was already getting stopped. You need to make it so that the group knows what you're about to do, and not just the group like sees a surprise effect go off and they're just like, okay, that person was stunning, I guess. That person was kicking. All right, well, we overlapped our kicks. That's worse than having not done anything.
Yeah, what Dorky said is really good. Like it's super, super good. And that's something he still talks with me about to this day, is that it's not just about being aware that something's happening, but it's actually almost easier to say it ahead of time, right? Because as an example, the guys in Shrine of the Storm who do the whirling slams and it does a bunch of damage to everyone, right? If as soon as you pull the pack, right, you just say, okay, I'm going to Typhoon the first one, or I'm going to Fel Eruption the first one, right? Not only are you helping your number one, you're helping your team. Number two, you're helping time the key because no one else is having to waste any spells and they know they can stand in on that. And number three, you're getting your job out of the way. I stopped it. Now I don't have to pay attention at all.
Yeah,
I can just do my own thing, right? It's almost easier to call it ahead of time and get the first one out of the way. Not only does everyone think you're an owner, but now I can just AFK and fang all the mobs or whatever DPS do.
That's such a good point. I always say I'm sweeping the first one, so I don't have to worry about it after that.
Absolutely. All right. Next point we have here is stay humble. So Growl, would you like to give your spiel on this one?
Yeah, so I talked about good things to do, right? But there's also really, really bad things to do. So I feel like a lot of times you're a person who you've been moving up, you're starting to pug keys, you're getting better, you're starting to get some good gear from Raid, you're starting to get really good at your class. Maybe you watch Yoda stream and you're sick, or Fana or whatever Demon Hunter that you watch.
Yeah, I think Growl's really into Yoda.
Oh, I love Yoda. But so now you're higher IO than most of your friends list. You're higher IO than everyone in your guild. People start to build this ego up, right? And then you're starting to go into keys, and if you're not thinking in the right manner and you're not motivated to get better, people start to have this effect where the higher up you go, the more toxic people are because they have these egos, right? And you start to blame people, and no one likes anybody who blames anybody. It's something that gets so common when you start to get higher up in keys, is that something goes wrong, and immediately the first thing that someone does when they die is they try and figure out, okay, whose fault was that? How do I explain that? Who missed their kick? The tank should have been standing over here, right? But first of all, number one, that doesn't help you get better. But most importantly, no one wants to play with you when you do that, okay? Like, this is the most common one, and I talk about this on my stream. I'm sure Trell can super relate to this one, okay? So you go into a pull, the Demon Hunter drops his Fang and his Beam and stuff, pulls threat and dies. What does he say? Opens up the death log. I got meleeed, right? He needs to let everybody know. He needs to tell everybody that it was not my fault, okay? It was
your fault, by the way.
It was the tank's fault. Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you think Trell thinks? Do you think Trell wants to invite you again when you do that? First of all, when you're basically pointing out to everyone in your group that, hey, Trell just messed up, guys. Trell's never gonna invite you to another key. And I mean the same thing as a healer too. If whatever's going on and someone's like, oh, I didn't get healed for 8 seconds, right? Hey, screw you. I hate you now. I'm not inviting you to a key. Anyone who says that, so you have to. I know it can be hard, right? It can be really frustrating, and very often it can be their fault, right? I use that as example, but as Tettle said, right, it kind of is their fault. But there can be tons of times where someone just misses a kick. It's completely their fault. There was nothing you could have done, and you depleted a key because of it. But it doesn't matter, right? You don't need to point that out. People don't like to play with you when you point it out, and you just need to deal with it. Hey, don't hold down your mic or whatever. Mute your mic and say it if it makes you feel better. Go throw something across the room if you got to vent it out somehow. But don't ruin your relationships with your teammates.
Yeah, exactly. Don't ruin your relationships with your teammates. In addition to that, dude, there are a lot of competent players that know whenever they make a mistake, you don't have to berate them and point out that they fucked up. They know. Like, oh shit, you missed a kick? We wiped because you missed that kick? It's like, oh, that's unlucky. Yeah, like you literally just like GG, go next. Like there's nothing for you to do. Like there are some times where there will be mistakes and they may fuck up and that you may wipe and lose a key over it. But having the approach of like what happened and how can we fix it, as opposed to why did you do that? Very different approaches for how you solve problems.
Such a good point. Like blaming right after a mistake is so bad on so many fronts because one, you can probably recover from that mistake and do the pull. Like Growl mentioned earlier, how his team just like ends up running back somehow and finishing it out, and then times the key in addition to that. And number two, you don't want to play with that player. I mean, it kind of declines from the interest of playing with that person if they constantly blame other people. And the other thing I was going to say was I'm very proud of the group I've been playing with recently. Like last week, we missed our rogue player missed the kick on the last boss in Shrine. He was the only kick up, and we all instantly died. Right? Nobody said a word to that person. Like obviously it was their fault. But nobody was like berating them or anything because he's just trying his best. Like he messed up. Everybody screws up eventually. No player's perfect.
Exactly. Yeah, like, if you berate somebody mid key too, you are just the worst person. Stop that.
Like I was doing this Toldegor. I was doing this Toldegor yesterday, and our idiot Resto Druid. He got locked in a cage when Jess Howlis was running around and unlocking the cages.
Deer trap.
Because he was trying to look for a key that he thought was maybe in that cage because we didn't have a rogue in the group. And that was just unbelievably stupid. And then our tank couldn't get any heals. And then Bobby went and ran into the cage and killed him. And then Bobby couldn't get out of the cage and snapped the rest of us into that cage to kill us all. And we wiped, and in the moment I was gonna say some very harsh words towards that idiot Resto Druid, but I didn't, I was good, and I was just like, you know what, just release, we can still time this, and we did still time that key. And so that's...
I want to see that.
There's nothing to say. Like, you just like, what the fuck just happened?
That's how Growl got some big IO from a Toldegor 20. He's just in cat form, running into each of the cages looking for keys.
I love how you name drop me, man. I thought you were trying to protect my identity. You're just like some anonymous Resto Druid. And then now the word is out already to the people that I can't believe this.
We learned that keys disappear when you go into and out of Nyalotha. So to any aspiring Toldegor no rogue groups, yeah, we picked one up from Jess's room, and then we tried to send that person on a mission to go back and unlock the battle shout buff, but we couldn't because they went into Nyalotha to get down there. So that's just some of the things
amazing. Another blow to Toldegor Warcraft does.
All right. Let's talk a little bit more about there's the clip as well. This is a good one. Let's talk a little bit about more philosophy of just the people that you're choosing to play with and the groups you're trying to put yourself into. And I think that this first point is actually applicable again to much more than just Mythic Plus. Is if you can trick people who are better than you into playing with you, that is how you will improve most. And it's a difficult thing to do. It's hard to find those opportunities, but ideally, you don't want to play in groups where you're the best player in the group. That's a very difficult thing to improve on. Is if you are the person who knows the most and is carrying people through 10s or whatever, and you could be doing 20s. It's hard to pick up things from that group. But if you're outside your comfort zone and you're in a key that is as high or higher than you're able to do, or with player, even if it's a lower level key, people's alts or whatever, but they're better players than you and they're higher IO on their mains or whatever, that is a huge place for you to A, make some good connections, and B, learn things about dungeons that you didn't know.
Right. And I was talking about earlier how if you're plugging in Group Finder, it can be hard to find keys that are for score, right? Well, what's next on the list if you can't find a key for score? How about start searching up some of these people, or you use the add-on who's in Group Finder, right? What if there's a key where it's a 15 and you wouldn't normally do it, but it's Trell helping out his, guildie doing a 15 or whatever, or it's Dratnos doing a viewer key or anything like that. I don't mean just a streamer personality, but just someone who's good in general, right? That's a good opportunity to get in a key with someone who's super good. I'm not saying, add them after the key or be like, hey, I got this 22 Toldegor, you want to help me with it? But at the same time, like if you can't find a key for score, that's the next best is, well, try and play a key with someone who's really good. Like I know Trance and Nico are kind of notorious for that they're both super good gamers, and they're always in Group Finder doing stupid keys. Like they're always looking in Group Finder of trying to find someone who's like some ridiculous spec, who's like not very good and who'll do funny stuff and who they can laugh with in Discord. So anytime you see people who are super good in Group Finder, just go in there and go in that group. It doesn't matter if it's someone's rat alt in their 410 item level. You know, hopefully you can learn something or at least do some sort of networking there.
I definitely played with your Mistweaver in season 2 at some point, doing like just like alt keys. That's where I met you, I'm pretty sure.
I did it. Yeah, I mean that's what I did. That's what I did in Group Finder. Is I would almost prioritize that, to be honest, over keys that were score. If I saw someone who was very high rated who I could get a chance to play with. And I also was quiet, right? I didn't be like, yo, what up, Trell? Let's be friends.
Yeah, you were really quiet
and stuff. All I did was show up and I play, and if you just keep doing that, eventually good things will.
It's so good for the show that Growl's here, because he did the exact like pugging up his own way. He didn't get carried by High Mythic Plus players. He did all of this himself. Like I just thought he was a solid healer at the time. He was like a mid-level IO. It was nice to meet him. I put him on my healer list, and I was like, I'll invite that guy if I ever need him for a key, 100%.
If you ever need a Mistweaver monk.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is a little obvious, but me and Trell didn't play.
I played with one healer for a long time. That's the only reason why.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the kind of score mentality, because you're talking about, you're these players, and 17s when they're score for you are maybe easy to find, and then now you need 19s for score and you can't find them in the group finder. You need 21s for score. What do you advise for players in that situation? You're looking in the group finder and you only see keys that aren't score for you.
I think people get a little bit spoiled because you can do that, right? You can go in Group Finder, you can do a key, it's score for you, especially if you play a meta class or a tank, right? Almost you can get into keys that, let's say you have a lot of 14s timed, you can get into a 15 or a 16 maybe as a person if you're a meta class, and you get a little bit spoiled. Then you get into, let's say, 20s or 21s, and you're like, well, I'm going to sit here now. I'm going to sit here for 6 hours waiting for a 21 key to show up in Group Finder that'll take me. But that's just not how it works. Like eventually you reach a point where you have to be willing to push keys up, and who knows, sometimes you might help someone push a key up and then they're going to leave and do it with their guild or whatever. And that's not fine, but it happens and you can't do anything about it. But you don't see, if you tune into Dr. J's stream or Now's stream, you don't see them standing in Great Seal just waiting for someone to show up with a 27 key because that's score for them, right? Like they're out here doing a 24 siege or a 24 shrine and trying to 2-chest it and push keys up, right? Just because someone is in a regular group doesn't mean that they're only going to push keys up, and because you don't have a regular group, you're just going to wait for a key that's scored. You have to be willing to do a couple keys. Like that's how you meet people, right? Like a lot of people want a regular group to push keys with, but they're only playing, let's say, 17s or 18s. Well, you don't want to hear it, but you don't want a regular group of people who are hard stuck at 18s. Like it might be a little toxic to say, but you don't want that, right? You want to find a couple people and push up a key and do a couple levels, and maybe you play with them a couple days later that week, and then you move on, and then you have some 20s, then you push up some more keys to do some 21s. Like it's more difficult than just going in Group Finder and going into a key, right? You have to be willing to push keys up.
Yeah, and the IO score that you bring, oftentimes I feel like people they feel like the IO score they have entitles them to get invited to some groups as well. What do you think about that kind of mentality?
I mean, there's always a little bit of entitlement. I think people in general start to dislike IO score because it becomes a barrier. But at the end of the day, you just have to understand that people who are pugging keys are doing their best, right? Like they don't have a lot of metrics. Like people aren't going to go down the list and look at all of your logs and see what guild you were in Legion, right? They only have a few seconds to decide whether or not you're a good enough player. And a lot of times IO score ends up being that. And it sucks to say, right? But no one is able to look into your soul and see how good you are or how many things you stun, right? People are going to judge you based off your score. So you do have to build it up. Like you have to be willing to just work and get score, and eventually people will play with you. And it does, people definitely do look at you in a different way, right? You may be 3K score and you have some people on your friends list that never message you, and then as you're pugging a lot you may get to 4K the next week, and now all of a sudden all these people are like, oh hey buddy, like hey, you want to come to this key, like we really need a healer right now. It's like, this is weird, you didn't need a healer last month, but now all of a sudden that I'm 4K you need a healer, and it happens, right? And it's just because it's hard to judge people, it's hard to know how good people are, and a lot of it is based off of the one number. And I don't want to say the number's not important, because it is, but at the same time, like there's other stuff to worry about too.
I think it depends on what level you are. If your primary use is like LFG and stuff like that, RaiderIO is fairly important. Like once you get to a certain level, though, it's basically just like networking with a Mythic Plus community at large and having people who think you're a good player and will invite you.
Yeah. Also, part of this is just being available, right? Being, you'll get more opportunities if you are AFK in Dazar'alor, right? Than if you are busy, and if your character's in Nyloth of the Waking City, people aren't going to whisper you, right? But if your character's AFK in Dazar'alor, that's the green light that says, hey, key.
Yeah, I mentioned this a lot on my stream, but you have to think about it, right? We're playing World of Warcraft. These aren't a ton of like socially expert people who are gonna like, oh, text your phone and hey man, you want a key? Like, these are people who are shy, like they don't want to get rejected, like they don't want to bother you, they don't want to message you when you're busy, right? So if you're not online, if you're expecting people to message you when you're offline on Battle.net or maybe go on Discord, like unless someone knows you really, really well, they're not going to. They're just gonna be like, well, so and so isn't online, like let's invite Lifebinder, let's invite Korzak, And so when I wasn't that well known and I was just trying to find groups, I would be sitting there in Great Seal, even if, hey, maybe it would be good for me to spend my time pugging a raid boss to try and get an item right now, or man, I really need to clean my kitchen. Like I would honestly, during push weeks, I would have my computer open, I would be sitting in Great Seal, and I would walk downstairs and I would clean my kitchen for 5 minutes, and I would come back and I'd be like, is anyone here? I would make sure my green light is on, I wouldn't be yellow light, I would check Viewfinder, see if there's anyone good, and then I would go down. And there's a lot of push weeks. There was a lot of push weeks that are like that. Everyone comes to my stream and is just like, wow, it must be really nice to just have a group that you can play with that times 25s, right? But man, I spent a lot of effort and I spent a lot of push weeks just on the bench, just sitting there waiting for people to play with. But at the end of the day, you have to be available and you can't be discouraged. Like there's going to be some push weeks where you log on and the people that you're playing with decided that they would rather play with someone else. Maybe it's someone's girlfriend, maybe it's someone who has 7 more gushing wounds than you, maybe it's someone who bought IO from Trance and they think they're good. Who knows why they're playing with this person, but at the end of the day, you may log on Tuesday and not have a group. And you can either be discouraged and, be sad and be like, no one plays with me, and then log on to Classic and clear BWL with your guild for the 50th time. Or you can try and find new people to play with, and you can wait and be patient, and don't be toxic towards those people either. Like, don't be like, hey, screw you, man. Like, I never want to play with you again. Like, who knows? Hey, like, there was a time when I played with Dorky or Tomobor, and he played with this other healer named Drogo, and me and him are pretty good friends. But at that point, right, like I was Drogo's bench. I sat there and I waited. I would have their Twitch stream open, one of them playing in my kitchen, right, cleaning, or maybe I was playing like Super Nintendo or something, and I would literally be praying for them to deplete that key and for Drogo to get tired and quit so that I could slide in there, right? And that just might, like, that's gonna be your spot, right? You don't go from someone who pugs 19 to someone who, oh, now I have a steady group and I do 25s, right? There's a lot of ugly stuff in between, and there's a lot of waiting and there's a lot of disappointment. And it's not like I just found some group and we did 19s and then everyone got better and it was happy peace land and all of a sudden we were all the number 1 NA group last week, right? It was blood, sweat, and tears the whole way. Don't get sad about getting benched or getting discouraged or whatever.
How do you feel about me tired?
Me tired, man. That was I don't know, that so Me Tired started, I think that was Nico from Trance's group, and it eventually evolved into Food Break, which is essentially when, if you're not familiar with this, this dynamic. You're playing with a group and you're maybe not happy with some of the players that you're playing with, and you wish to play with new players, but you don't want to just kick them, right? So you announce me tired or food break, then everyone leaves the group, and then there's a redraft of players. And so as someone on the bench, you want me tired, you want food break, because then you might get a shot of getting drafted into the new squad. And that used to be a meme. You used to, like, I would literally say the phrase, I got food braked, meaning that I'm playing with a group and their main healer is on, you know, I did a few keys with Trell, but now Jamal or whoever's on, and oh, Trell's hungry, time to take a food break, and I log off, and
man, I never
now
did
they
that
have
to
a
you.
new healer. No, Trell
Yes,
would
you
never
do. Everybody does that shit.
Everyone does it. Everyone does it.
His fucking guild did that.
What?
I tried.
Poetry
Poetry
Club.
Club did that's true.
We food breaked half of our roster. Yeah, we after January we were just like, yeah, man, we got to disband, and then just like 4 weeks later we're like, all right, Poetry Club now recruiting new guild. It's just 10 of the same players and 10 players no longer there.
I think it actually is like kind of
Food break to fucking guild.
I think everyone should actively avoid doing that to people. I really hate like asking someone to do keys and then like our fifth member ends up being there. Like, yeah, after I asked him to do the key, and I'm like, oh, now what do I do? I gotta make someone feel bad, you know? I really hate doing that to people. And I think everybody else out there that does Mythic Plus and is trying to work their way up should not do that either. Like, be honest with people and tell them there's the situation, and don't just like randomly ditch them if you can help it.
This is one I want to get this in here because this is actually a really common dynamic as well that it's important. So here's a situation that Trell mentioned, right? Let's say I use Jamal, but what healer do you play with now? So I'm more politically correct.
His name's Coop.
Coop. Okay, so let's say Trell's playing with Coop, and Coop needs to go. He needs to pick up his grandmother from the airport, right? And what does that team do? Well, chances are that team is just going to go AFK, right? They're going to wait for Coop to come back. Trell doesn't want to message me and say, "Hey, Growl, come," right? Because he doesn't want to have me come for one key and then have to kick me or whatever, right? But I try and actively let people know, like, man, I'll play one key. You know, if I'm watching, like, it doesn't really, you don't want to do this if you're just a random Twitch viewer, right? But let's just say this is a guild group, or this dynamic, right? I'll see Trell streaming and I'll see them, oh, we need a healer. I'll be like, yo, I'll play for only one key. Just get me in there. I'll play my one key. I don't even care if it's a reroll, if it's a 27 King's Rest weekly no lever. Get me in there. I'll play one and then kick me. I'm fine with that, because Trell will not invite you for one key, right? He'll not, because he doesn't want to have that dynamic of, okay, now Coop is back, I need to figure out what I do now. I have two healers. So he's just going to sit there. He doesn't want to invite another healer for one key. And honestly, that's a great way to get your foot in the door for people, is be willing to do bad keys. Like, very often this is what happens with our group is it's Sunday night, it's Monday morning, and we have 5 King's Rests in our group, right? Our team is me tired. No one wants to do those King's Rests. Well, what did we end up doing? We ended up going in Group Finder, and we got some random guy who had good logs, who was a mage, because Dorky didn't want to play. Dorky calls it homework for us. That's our homework to do. When Dorky isn't there, we have to re-roll the keys so that we have good keys when Dorky comes back. So we do homework. But anyway, so that's a good thing that you can do, is get in there for these bad keys, right? That's another way that you can play with people who are better than you. Dratno's talked about tricking people, right? Maybe they're tricking you actually, because you're just the key reroll squad. But at the end of the day, like, you're getting in the door with a group that's way better than you, and who knows, right? Maybe you own, or what happens when you play with Trell, right? And even if it's only a low key, what about the 200 people on Trell's stream? They're like, hey, that guy's playing with Trell. Holy shit. They don't know what you're doing, right? They just see you're playing with a good group, or you're with Dratnos' group, or hey, or they look at your RaiderIO, right? And you have one key. So one of the things that Tanner did, it was like sort of a joke, but at the beginning of season 2, I knew Tanner, who knows now from Method, and he was making a US account, and he a complete rat. He had the rattiest character, and he was doing like 15s and 16s, but they, you know what I mean? Who wants to carry a rat? I was like, well, I'll get in there, and people see me on Now stream, and they're like, hey, this is the guy who heals Now on NA, right? And I'm just nobody. I'm just the only guy willing to heal his ratty demon hunter, but at least it gets you in keys and gets you known, and people see, they recognize your name and stuff.
It's true.
All right, this is
good.
Man, this has been a
Growl has
wild
a lot.
ride.
I could talk infinitely, man. I love this game. This is like part of why I do what I do and make YouTube videos and stream and help people is because, man, this is more fun playing games than I've had in so long. Like there was such a period where I was so down on the gaming industry and video games, and I would just be like, man, every game sucks. And I played Dota and it was like whatever, and I was like kind of good at that game, and I played Han a little bit before that, and I played StarCraft 2, and it was like nothing really like scratched my itch for gaming for so long until I started playing Mythic Plus, and it was one of the funnest things I've ever done. And if I can do anything in this game, like my mission is just to let other people know how freaking fun it is and how they like it's such a crazy dynamic of having a high level of coordination with your friends and like that back and forth of everyone playing together. But it's still a relatively low pressure scenario, right? Because you're not playing against some crazy, Asian basement sweating nerds who just sit there and play for 16 hours a day and adapt to you and have all these crazy strategies, right? You're playing against AI at the end of the day. So anyone can overcome the challenges. You don't need some crazy reflexes or dynamic thinking to do Mythic Plus, right? You just need experience and coordination and trying to do your best. That's all. It's hard, but it's not that hard. Like the Total Gore that Dratnos was talking about, right? I was kind of memeing on people a little bit there. Like I was messing around. I was AFK almost the entire Jess Howless floor. I locked myself in a cage. We full wiped to Jess Howless. We ran back and then we timed the key. And we have rat alts, right? This isn't like everyone's owner mains, right? We're playing with Ventor is playing Bear, I think, in that key. And I'm just like, come on, guys. Like you can get in here. You can time 20s. Like anyone who's in the chat right now who hasn't timed 20s yet, like, come on. You can do it. It's hard, but it's not that hard.
All right. For those players, for those aspiring players, and actually for everybody, let's talk a little bit about some of your advice for improvement specifically. So like a few small actionable things that you can start to do to if your goal is not just like how do I get into better groups, but like, okay, actually how do I play better? Because again, part of getting into better groups is like playing better is how you will increase the chance that somebody's going to want to invite you. So what are some of the ways to do that, in your opinion? So
one thing I always say, this is what I did. This is why I stream. Eventually, people just started showing up to watch me and and whatever. But I would stream to one viewer, and the reason I do it is because recording yourself play and watching back, it is so important because there's so much stuff going on in Mythic Plus, right? There's so many spells. It's like a constant balancing act of trying to do a good job with your rotation, but at the same time, like, what is my team doing? What are the mobs doing? You're looking at the count, the pace of the dungeon. You just don't have the memory. You don't remember what happened. After something goes wrong and you deplete, you have no idea what happened. And I only learned that from recording myself a lot and watching back. And I would think like, there was nothing I could have done there. And then I would see like, man, I didn't even press FO. Like I didn't even have my core rotational ability on the ground. Like, and then you can go back and see maybe why didn't I have that? Or maybe, something else happened that you didn't even analyze, or maybe there was something on your screen that was hidden because it was behind your party frame and that's why you didn't see it. And so people always come to my stream like, oh, I was doing a 24 at all and my tank died to the bleed and I didn't have bark. And I told him, man, you should have used something. And he's like, you need to heal that. And it's like, man, I can't tell you the answer to that. Like, you need to record, like, what was your cast sequence there? Like, what were you missing globals? Did he mess up? Like, how many raptors was there? Like, it's pretty complex, and being able to record yourself and watch back helps you a ton. It helps you a ton. So that's like the one, if I could give one tip to anybody, it's that.
Okay, well, Growl just used it as like a blame assignment tool sometimes. Sometimes it is good to be able to see what actually happened. I would use them as more of a learning tool as opposed to like a blame assignment tool. I guess it kind of depends on like what your group dynamic is, or like what your relationship as like a tank healer combo would be in that scenario. But like using it more of as an understanding of how you should be playing things going into the future is definitely better than being like, oh, you fucking suck. You should have pressed Iron Skin Brew one global faster and transcended out of the way of danger and blah, 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 blah. But like in reality, you have to be like pretty introspective about the whole thing.
Yeah, this isn't blame. It isn't. Sorry it may have sounded like, and sometimes I do it jokingly as blame, but 100% it's what could I have done. And at the same time, to go into feedback, I'll try and make it brief, but don't tell, let's say you notice something, right? Let's say you notice your rogue messed up, right? Or your tank messed up. You don't tell them right away. This is something that Dorky is really good at, actually, is that I'll make a mistake, right? And he won't be like, Growl, you should have done this. That was obvious, right? But the next day, I'll wake up, I'll be drinking my morning coffee, and Dorky would be like, hey, remember that 26 atoll that we did? That was y'all's fault, all right? You should have done this. And if you detach that, anytime you do want to give your teammates feedback, because sometimes it's important if you're in a regular group, don't do it right after you deplete stuff, right? Don't leave some time, let it sit, you have to completely separate criticism from blame. When you do it, and that almost comes down to time, right? If you do it immediately after something bad happens, that's blame, that's ego. A lot of people mask it as criticism. They pretend like, oh, well, I'm just trying to help my teammate. No, you're not. You're trying to blame people.
Yeah, you're making them feel bad.
Yeah, wait a day. And yeah, well, that I guess
that's such good advice. Man, I've been trying to put that into words for so long for people, and that was like ideal how you said that. We need to have Growl on the show like every other week.
Yeah, man, we've been podcasting for like a year, and Growl's just coming in here doing it in one show. This is he's just climbing that podcast.
Doesn't even have a camera. He's just spouting knowledge.
Yo, this is his episode, bro. This is our 1-year anniversary.
I think it's better that people think that I'm a cat with a waffle on its head anyway. Like, it makes me more majestic, Like, see how stoic that cat looks? Like, it's a crown to him. It's a crown. It might be that I'm just in this little microcosm of Mythic Plus and nothing matters and we're just playing against computers all day. But at the end of the, we're majestic. We're accomplishing great things together.
Back to the recording thing, though. In addition to what he's saying, I think it's actually a tool for ending the arguments. Like, if you go back and look as a team later, not like immediately during the key, because that just makes it worse and more frustrating. But if you look at it later as a group and see exactly what happened on a recording, then it just like resolves the argument, because then everybody's opinions are on the same page, and you can decide what you want to do different from that point. And it's like a just calm, analytical manner rather than a blame, pointing finger game.
All right, let's talk a little bit about UI as well. Do you have any?
Hold on, the guy in the chat who said 4K IO cat, I would like to correct you. I'm 5.5K. Okay, don't insult me.
Shut up. Okay, can we just go on a rant about not having an ego?
the cat on my video is a 4K IO cat.
Man,
I think that's
man. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about how you can tweak your UI to enhance your Mythic Plus experience. What do you do with your UI, Growl, that you think is worth pointing out?
Oh yeah, so this is another good one. I think it's a little specific to healer, but it's good for everybody. So you go back, right? You recorded yourself, you watch back. Maybe you figured out what happened, right? Maybe it's a cast went off. Maybe you didn't use a spell that you should have. Whatever happened, right? A lot of times you can use your UI to help you, right? If you help things be more visible, because if you do that combination, right, if you watch back, you identified a mistake that you made and you tweak your UI so that, who knows, maybe a new sound plays when this ability happens, or maybe you have a weak aura that you made glow now instead of not glow. That combination, your brain just clicks immediately. Like, you never make that same mistake again because you're ready for it. A story I have for that is, I was in a group, and now that you have a little bit of my mentality, it makes more sense how I'm in this group, right? So I'm in a group with this guy. He doesn't play as much now. His name is Kimbodi. He's super good rogue, though. He's been a top rogue every season, and I was just helping them reroll a key or doing their alt key or whatever. And Trell says, "Great guy." I'm going to tell the story. So we're doing the Juggernauts in Atoll Dazar, and if you're not familiar with the way most good groups do that, they have a charge that targets a person if they're in range, and in high keys the charge just kills you instantly. If you get hit by it, you're dead. And so the strategy that a lot of groups do is you have one person far away on a spot where he can't charge you, so then everyone else is close, the Juggernaut tries to charge you, and then he can't charge you and he doesn't do anything. But sometimes things go wrong. Either you can't be in that spot or you die or whatever happens. So then you're in trouble, right? Maybe it's volcanic or maybe there's whatever happens. And I was in this key with Kimbodi, and I whatever happens and I'm off of the spot now and I'm vulnerable to this charge, well, you can still move out of the way. If you know the charge is coming, you can move out of the way of the charge. But because I was a little new and I wasn't experienced, whatever happens, I end up getting hit by it and I die. And we wipe because you don't have a healer, obviously, and we end up depleting the key. And immediately after I die, I'm just like, man, I can't believe I died. Like, I wish I would have stayed in the spot or whatever. And I just hear Cambodian Discord say, wow, how do you die to that? And immediately my heart is just like, oh my God, like I can never make this mistake again. So immediately after that key, the first thing I do is let me find a weak aura that immediately after the charge goes off, it makes a noise, and it's a loud noise, and it's right in the middle of my screen. And to that day, I almost never die to that, because even if I'm not in the spot, I have this giant weak aura that blows up in my screen of this Juggernaut charge. And you have to do that a lot. Like, that's a lot of your growth, as especially a healer, but as anyone in general, is you make mistakes, you figure out how to correct those mistakes, and then you go on. And to talk about UI, your UI is that, right? Your UI is there to help you when you're in a key. And sometimes when you make a mistake, it's because you didn't know something was coming. Well, how do I fix that? Can I add a sound to this ability? Can I make it so it's got a countdown? Like, one thing I use sometimes is I have a countdown. So as soon as I all of a sudden my screen just starts going 3, 2, 1, and it immediately puts me back to this moment where I depleted a key because I hit this ability, and I remember, okay, let me not do this again. And I feel like a lot of people don't put enough care into their UI, and your UI should be evolving all the time. Every time you make mistakes and you think, if I only saw this or I only knew this, you should be familiar with your UI. You know, I see so many people who come into whoever's chat, you know, now or Nerf Tank, and they're like, oh my God, let me just subscribe. I need to get this subscriber only UI for $5 and then I'll be as good as Nerf Tank. But that's not really how UIs work. I mean, I'm not trying to hurt Nerf sales or now sales, but you know, your UI should be an extension of you, and it's there to help you. And what works for other people doesn't necessarily work for you. And you should figure out how to constantly change your UI to help you not make the same mistakes again that you made.
You want to know some of the crazy shit I've seen with your UI? The fact that you track demo shout on mobs.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was the thing, right? Because I mentioned that tip earlier, right? Understand how tanks work. A tank uses Demo Shout. Not only does it give them a lot of rage, but it reduces all the damage that those mobs do to the tank. It's essentially a shield wall, right? It's one of the most powerful defensive cooldowns a warrior has. And on top of that, with the Azerite trait, Deafening Crash, it extends the duration of Demo Shout. So you don't, usually it lasts the full the extension of it, but either way, you don't always know how long it's going to last. And at one point I was playing with the tank and I said, well, I need to figure out exactly what this tank is doing. When I learned how good Demo Shout is, I'm like, well, why can't I see this? I need to see this, because if you see a lot of healers come in my chat, it's like, I want to do more damage. How do I do more damage? And it's like, well, if you know what's going on with your tank, then you know when to do damage. You know, okay, well, my tank not only has Avatar up, but he has Demo Shout up. Like, okay, now I'm a cat, right? Now I'm a cat for the next 20 seconds. He's invulnerable. But it doesn't mean it's when you want to do more damage, it doesn't mean, okay, well, I'm just going to sit in cat form for this whole freaking key. And because first of all, your tank hates that. Your whole team hates that. If you want to do more damage, you need to figure out, well, when should I be in cat, right? Well, how do I figure out when to be in cat? Well, you need to change your UI, right? Maybe you need to see Demo Shout on mobs. Maybe you need to see when your tank is an Avatar. Man, I cannot believe how many people are doing 25 keys who don't know when their tank is an Avatar. Like, it just completely baffles me as a healer, or as anyone, but specifically as a healer. Avatar is such a powerful cooldown. If you do not see when your tank is an Avatar, I don't even understand how these healers exist.
Well, I understand how DPS exists, where they don't track tank defense.
Sure, I mean, either. DPS barely look at their raid frames. Let's be real. DPS don't even raid party frames or whatever. As a DPS, you don't even look, unless you're a boomkin. Boomkins look at their party frames, but no one else.
I got trees.
So I guess
that's because they're not a DPS.
I specifically meant healers with this regards. It's crazy how many healers don't how do you know when you can DPS or not? Like, that's how I know, right? I'm not sitting here like, okay, well, the health bars are full. Like, that means I can swipe. I mean, it sort of does, but it's a lot more eloquent than that. You know, you have to know it just comes down to knowing what's going on with your team. And you say that, right, about a DPS shouldn't or probably doesn't know that, right? But maybe they do, right? And if anything, as a tank, you know that, right? You go into a pull and you don't have Avatar. As a bear, you don't have Incarn, right? You're going to have way less threat. Man, maybe a DPS should know that, right? Because maybe a DPS should know that when you're going into the obelisk, the tank isn't going to have Avatar. And what Avatar does is it reduces the cooldown on your Thunderclap. And Thunderclap is the ability that you use to generate threat in AoE. So when you don't have Avatar going into an obelisk, you're going to have a hard time grabbing all the mobs right away. And as a DPS, you should know that. So I would say that it's more important for a healer to see, but I mean, why doesn't everyone see? Like how is, as a DPS, that should have been part of your growing process. You should go into an obelisk, you should eye beam or demon wings or whatever demon hunters do, pull thread on all the little spiders and die, and then watch it back and then think, okay, what could I have done there? And then you watch back and you think, not only did my tank not have Avatar, but I had no freaking idea if he had Avatar. I didn't know if he had Avatar in 10 seconds. I don't even know how to spell Avatar. So let me fix my UI, let me track it. So I know, okay, we're going into this obelisk. My tank doesn't have Avatar. My bear doesn't have Incarn, so he's got a higher cooldown on Thrash, so he can't pull all the mobs. Like, I think that's part of that process of evolving your UI and making yourself a better player so you don't make that mistake. Like, a lot of what people would do is okay, so the demon hunter goes through the obelisk now, and now they're just going to immediately mash blur and just sit there for 5 seconds, right? That's their adjustment, but that's not the right adjustment, because if the tank has Avatar rolling or the bear has Incarn rolling, he's going to grab all those mobs instantly, so you don't need to wait there, right? It's a matter of using your UI to identify the situation that you're in.
Yeah, it can be really tough for demon hunters because, you know, if you hit blur at a bad time, you might just not have it up when you need it because it's such a long cooldown. So you don't really have access to that defensive as needed.
Shut up, Tradness.
All right.
Oh, this is fantastic, though. All those things I would tell anyone that's a tank player as well to, like, remind your DPS players and your healers of, like, if you're going into a poll and you don't have Avatar, tell them that, because odds are they're not tracking it, even though they should. But you should tell them so they don't go kill themselves with threat.
Well, that was definitely a great segment of moving from medium to high keys. I feel like that synthesized all the information pretty well.
Yeah, I think this is a fantastic show. Thanks so much for coming on the show this week, Growl. And we'll be in contact with your agent to try and bring you on again sometime soon.
Yeah, hopefully I don't get banned by then. Hopefully I'm still a person that exists by the next time I can be on.
Yeah. All right. We're going to cut out the Q&A segment, though, this week, as the show has already gone a little long. We'll answer more questions next week, but that's going to be where we'll end this one. So later, everybody. Bye.
Peace.
Bye.